When people think about trauma, they often think of memories, of painful images or haunting recollections that linger in the mind. But trauma is not simply what happened to you. Trauma is what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you. It is not the event itself, but the imprint it leaves on your body, your brain, and your nervous system. Trauma changes how you live, how you breathe, how you relate to others, and how safe you feel in your own skin. In my decades of work with trauma survivors, from war veterans to abused children to victims of chronic neglect, one truth has emerged consistently. Trauma is not just remembered, it is relived. Over and over, the body reactivates, the nervous system floods, and the world once again feels unsafe, even when danger is long gone. This is the essence of survival mode, when your body keeps reacting as if the trauma is still happening, even years after it has passed. Healing from trauma, then, is not about forgetting the past or simply processing a painful memory. Healing requires creating a sense of safety in the present. It requires helping the body learn that it is no longer in danger. And that process begins not with words, but with regulation, with restoring a sense of calm, grounding, and connection. Because you cannot reason your way out of survival mode. You can't simply tell yourself you're safe, not when every cell in your body believes otherwise. We live in a culture that often tells us to just move on, to stop dwelling on the past. But for trauma survivors, the past is not past. It's present. It's in the flinch when someone raises their voice. It's in the panic that arises for no apparent reason. It's in the inability to trust, to relax, to feel at home in one's body. Trauma survivors don't need to be told to move on. They need to be helped back into their bodies. They need to feel safe again, perhaps for the very first time. When we're in survival mode, everything changes. Our priorities shift from growth, curiosity, and exploration to vigilance, control, and avoidance. We stop learning, we stop playing, we stop dreaming, because the body's only mission is to keep us alive. And while that is essential in the midst of real danger, it becomes a prison when the danger is no longer real, but our biology hasn't gotten the message. I've called this phenomenon the body keeps the score, because no matter how much we try to suppress, ignore, or rationalize our pain, our bodies remember. They store it in tension, in tightness, in shallow breaths, in racing hearts, in digestive problems, in insomnia, and in the inability to feel present. The body does not lie. It tells the truth about what we have endured, whether we consciously remember it or not. This is why traditional talk therapy, while often helpful, is not enough on its own for many trauma survivors, because trauma is stored not just in language and memory, but in sensation and neurobiology. You can't talk your way out of a body that feels unsafe. You can't think your way into calm. Safety must be experienced, felt, and embodied. The work of healing begins then with helping the nervous system shift from defense to connection, from survival to presence, from hypervigilance to regulation. And that means helping people find practices, experiences, and relationships that make their bodies feel safe enough to let go. Because until the body feels safe, the mind will remain trapped in fear. Over the course of this video, we'll explore why safety is not a luxury, but a biological prerequisite for healing. We'll look at the neuroscience of trauma, the survival responses of the nervous system, the connection between trauma and the body, and most importantly, how healing happens, not just intellectually, but somatically through movement, breath, rhythm, connection, and attunement. We'll explore the tools that help trauma survivors come back into their bodies, build resilience, and reclaim their lives. This message is not just for those who have been through extreme abuse or war. Trauma comes in many forms. It can be the result of emotional neglect, chronic stress, racism, poverty, or 1,000 small violations of safety and connection. If you feel like your body is always bracing for impact, if you struggle to relax, trust, or feel joy, if you find yourself numb, anxious, or disconnected from the world around you, this message is for you. Healing is possible, but not through willpower alone, not by trying harder. The first step is not toughness, but safety, the kind of safety that allows your body to stop fighting, to stop fleeing, to stop freezing. Only then can you begin to heal. Let's begin this journey by understanding what survival mode really is and how it shows up in your body and brain, because before we can exit it, we have to know we're in it. When the human brain perceives danger, it doesn't ask for your permission. It reacts instantly, automatically, and powerfully. This reaction is what we call survival mode, and it governs much of what we do when we're under threat. For many trauma survivors, this state becomes a permanent operating system, not just a temporary emergency response. Survival mode is not just one thing. It comes in several forms, each rooted in evolution and designed to protect us. You've likely heard of the fight or flight response, but there's more. There's freeze, where your body shuts down and goes numb. And there's fawn, where you appease others in order to stay safe. These four responses, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, are all part of the body's effort to survive overwhelming experiences. Let's start with fight. This is when your body mobilizes to confront the danger. It's the pounding heart, the clenched fists, the surge of adrenaline that says, I have to protect myself. It can show up in trauma survivors as irritability, rage, and a tendency to overreact to small provocations. These individuals aren't being irrational. They're stuck in a loop where their body believes it's still fighting for survival. Flight is the need to escape. The heart races, muscles tense, eyes scan for exits. It can show up later in life as anxiety, restlessness, or a chronic need to stay busy. People who are stuck in flight mode may seem hyperproductive or can't relax because stillness feels dangerous. When you're always running, you don't have to feel the fear that's chasing you. Freeze is the body's last resort. When neither fighting nor fleeing will work, the brain shuts everything down. This is not weakness, it's biology. The freeze response is the brain's way of numbing pain, physical or emotional, and dissociating from the unthinkable. People stuck in freeze often feel disconnected, emotionally flat, or chronically fatigued. They may struggle to recall details or feel outside of their body. It's not laziness, it's a nervous system overwhelmed by trauma. Then there's fawn, a response many people don't even recognize as survival. Fawning is when you learn to please, to appease, to abandon your own needs in order to keep others calm. This often develops in childhood trauma, especially in environments with unpredictable caregivers. If love or safety was conditional, you learned to shapeshift, to silence your own discomfort, to put others first no matter the cost. In adulthood, this can manifest as people-pleasing, lack of boundaries, or difficulty asserting your needs. All of these responses serve the same function, survival. But when the trauma ends and your nervous system doesn't reset, these responses become maladaptive. You may find yourself lashing out, running away, shutting down, or over-accommodating, not because you want to, but because your body has never stopped bracing for impact. The tragedy is that most trauma survivors are not aware that they're in survival mode. They blame themselves for being too sensitive, too angry, too needy, too numb. They think something is wrong with them, but what's really happening is that their body is still protecting them long after the danger has passed. The problem isn't that they're broken. The problem is that their system hasn't felt safe enough to let go. And this brings us to something profoundly important. You can't heal if your body is still bracing for danger. Healing requires presence, curiosity, and self-compassion, none of which are accessible when your nervous system is in a constant state of alarm. Before we can process the trauma cognitively, we have to help the body come out of defense. We must create the conditions for safety. This is why trauma treatment that ignores the body is incomplete. Talk therapy alone often isn't enough. It can help you understand your patterns, but it can't always shift them. That's because the trauma isn't only in your thoughts. It's in your reflexes, in your breath, in the way your shoulders hunch when someone raises their voice. It's in your startled response, your hypervigilance, your inability to rest. So when I work with trauma survivors, my first priority is not asking them to recount the story. It's helping their nervous system find a sense of safety, often for the first time in their life. That might involve grounding techniques, body-based practices, or simply learning how to notice sensations without being overwhelmed by them. We are not rushing into the past. We are building the resources to tolerate the present. It's important to remember that survival mode is not a choice. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a moral failure. It's a deeply intelligent response to danger, one that worked at the time and maybe saved your life. But what saved you then is now costing you dearly. Your relationships, your peace, your capacity for joy, all can be compromised when your body is locked in survival. But there is hope. The brain is plastic. The nervous system can be rewired. You can teach your body slowly, gently, that it's safe to let go. And once safety is restored, real healing becomes possible. You move from surviving to living. The body keeps the score, how trauma becomes physical.
I titled one of my books, "The Body Keeps the Score," because that single phrase captures the essence of how trauma operates. It's not just a clever metaphor, it is a physiological reality. When something deeply frightening or overwhelming happens to us, and we're unable to process it at the time, either because we were too young, too helpless, or too shocked, that experience doesn't disappear. It gets embedded. It leaves a record, not in your conscious mind, but in your body's tissues, in your muscles, in your nervous system.
Trauma shows up as tight shoulders you can never seem to relax, a gut that twists at the smallest sign of stress, or a pounding heart that seems to react before you even understand why. It appears in your posture, in the way you walk into a room, in how close you allow someone to stand next to you. It affects your sleep, your digestion, your immune system, your hormones. This is why so many trauma survivors have chronic physical symptoms that doctors can't explain. They are not imagining it. Their body is reliving something it never got to resolve. When we experience trauma, especially early in life, our brain makes a decision. Survival first, everything else later. Logical thought, language, and memory are turned down. Instead, the body gears up for fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. The amygdala, our brain's alarm system, goes on high alert. Cortisol floods the system, muscles brace, breathing becomes shallow. And if the trauma is repeated or prolonged, this becomes the new baseline. Your body doesn't return to safety, it adapts to danger. One of the most heartbreaking things I see in survivors is how deeply they've internalized their symptoms. They think they're weak for being anxious. They feel ashamed of their hypervigilance. They blame themselves for their inability to relax or trust others. But what they need to hear, what you need to hear if this is your story, is that your body is not betraying you. It's protecting you. It adapted to danger because it had to. And those adaptations, while once helpful, are now getting in the way of your ability to live a full, connected life. But let me be clear, you are not broken. You are injured, and just as physical wounds need care, time, and the right conditions to heal, so does trauma. That healing does not start in the thinking brain. It starts in the body. That's why body-based approaches, yoga, breathwork, EMDR, sensorimotor psychotherapy, somatic experiencing, are not alternative. They're essential. They're based on the understanding that safety, movement, and presence must come before insight. In my work, I've witnessed how powerful these methods can be. I've seen people who couldn't tolerate being touched finally lie down in a yoga class and feel safe in their own skin. I've seen combat veterans reclaim their ability to feel calm. I've seen survivors of childhood abuse take a full, deep breath for the first time in decades. And that is where healing begins. When the body learns that it is no longer in danger, that it doesn't have to brace anymore, that it can return to a state of calm and curiosity. You don't have to relive every detail of your trauma to heal. You don't have to retell the story again and again. What you need is to feel safe, not just in your mind, but in your body. You need to gently guide your nervous system out of survival mode and into a space where connection, play, rest, and growth are possible again. The body is not the enemy. It's the doorway. The pain you carry is not proof that something is wrong with you. It's evidence that something happened to you, something that overwhelmed your ability to cope, to make sense of it, to integrate it. But you are not that moment. You are not that pain. You are the one who survived it. And your body, with time and compassion, can learn to feel safe again. So when your heart races for no reason, when you startle at loud noises, when you can't sleep or focus or feel connected to others, don't ask, what's wrong with me? Ask, what happened to me? And how did my body learn to protect me from it? That question opens the door, not just to understanding, but to healing. And that's what we'll explore next. How safety is not just a feeling, it is a requirement for recovery. Because no one can heal while their body still believes it's in a war zone. Healing begins the moment your body feels it has finally come home. Safety. First, why talking alone isn't enough. If I could offer just one truth to every trauma survivor, it would be this. You cannot heal if your body still believes it's unsafe. We live in a culture that overvalues words. We believe that if we can talk about something enough, we can think our way out of it. We assume that healing happens in the head, in conversation, in cognition, in understanding. But trauma isn't stored in the thinking brain. It's stored in the emotional brain, the survival brain, and most importantly, in the body. And if the body doesn't feel safe, the mind can't truly relax. Many of my patients have already told their story in therapy, to friends, sometimes over and over again, and yet they still don't feel better. Why? Because no amount of talking can override a nervous system that's stuck in fight, flight, or freeze. You can understand your trauma intellectually and still be triggered by a sound, a smell, or a facial expression. You can know rationally that you're not in danger, but your body will respond as if you are, because that's where the trauma lives. So healing doesn't begin with words, it begins with safety. Not just external safety, but felt safety. That means your body needs to experience moment by moment that it is no longer in danger, that the war is over, that you don't need to brace, hide, or shut down anymore. This is why trauma recovery is fundamentally a process of retraining the nervous system. When people are traumatized, they often become disconnected from their own internal cues. They stop feeling hunger or fatigue. They lose the ability to tell whether someone is safe or not. Their body becomes a battlefield they avoid. The first step in healing is gently reconnecting, learning to feel again, to notice again, to sense again. This doesn't happen through logic. It happens through experience, through practices that invite the body back into the present moment. Breathing exercises that calm the vagus nerve, gentle movement that helps discharge stored tension, rhythmic activities like drumming, walking, dancing, all of which regulate the nervous system. Even something as simple as placing your hand over your heart and breathing deeply can be profound. These practices don't just feel good, they rewire the brain. Therapies like EMDR and somatic experiencing work because they go beyond talk. They help people access the sensations and memories held in the body and process them in a way that allows the nervous system to complete what was once interrupted. Trauma freezes us in time. These methods help unfreeze us. It's also why relationship is so essential. Safe connection with another human being is one of the most powerful tools we have for healing trauma. In fact, trauma often happens in relationships through betrayal, abuse, neglect. So it makes sense that healing must also happen in relationships, but not just any relationship. It has to feel safe, predictable, attuned, consistent. In my practice, I've seen people slowly begin to trust again, not because I gave them advice or solutions, but because I showed up consistently with presence and care. I created a space where they could finally feel seen without being judged. That's what a safe therapeutic relationship is, a new experience of being held, regulated, and respected, something many trauma survivors never had. Now, I know that safety can sound abstract, so let me make it concrete. Safety in this context looks like this: being able to breathe fully without bracing, feeling the ground beneath your feet and knowing you're not about to fall, being in the presence of another person without scanning for threat, being able to say no without fear, having space between a trigger and a reaction, feeling like your body belongs to you. If those things sound foreign to you, I want you to know that's not your fault. Your body adapted, it protected you, and it can learn a new way. The truth is, trauma healing is not about going back to who you were before. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be, before the fear, before the hypervigilance, before the shutdown. But that process begins always with safety, and you don't have to rush it. The body heals in the present, slowly, gently, in layers. There is no one-size-fits-all path. Some people begin with movement, others begin with breath. Some start with therapy, others with art or animals or nature. But the common thread in all effective healing is this: the nervous system begins to feel safe again. When that happens, everything changes. Your body starts to relax. Your thoughts become clearer. Your emotions feel less overwhelming. You start to notice joy, real joy, not just the absence of fear. You can sleep, you can eat, you can love, you can laugh. These aren't luxuries. They're signs that your system is coming out of survival. So if you've been stuck, if talk therapy hasn't worked for you, it doesn't mean you failed. It means your body is asking for something deeper, something more fundamental, something it never got: safety, presence, regulation. Your body needs to learn that it's okay to exist, that the danger is gone, that you can rest, and you can. Healing is not linear. Some days will be hard. Some memories will rise when you least expect them. But every moment of safety, every breath you take with ease, every moment of connection, they all count. They all matter. They are the building blocks of a new life. In the next part, we'll explore why childhood trauma is so devastating and how it shapes your brain, beliefs, and relationships long into adulthood. The power of safe relationships, how connection creates healing. When people ask me, what is the most important factor in healing trauma, they often expect a technical answer, perhaps a type of therapy, a specific medication, or a novel brain scan. But my answer is always the same: safe connection. The single most important ingredient in healing from trauma is a feeling of safety in relationship. Trauma, by its very nature, is isolating. It separates you from others, even if you're surrounded by people. You feel alone in your pain, and if your trauma involved betrayal, if those who were supposed to protect you were the source of harm, that isolation becomes even deeper. The world feels unsafe. People feel dangerous. Vulnerability becomes something to avoid at all costs. And yet it is precisely that vulnerability in the presence of safety that opens the door to healing. This isn't just a poetic idea. It's how the human nervous system works. Our brains are wired for connection. We are social creatures, and our biology evolved to regulate itself through relationships. A calm voice, a compassionate gaze, a warm touch. These are not just emotional comforts. They are neurological regulators. They tell our bodies, you are safe now. When a child is scared, the first thing they do is look for a caregiver, not just for protection, but for regulation. The caregiver's calmness becomes the child's calmness. That's co-regulation, our ability to use the nervous systems of others to regulate our own. And it doesn't end in childhood. As adults, we still need safe, attuned relationships to bring our systems back into balance. This is why trauma that occurs in the context of relationships, like abuse or neglect, must be healed in the context of relationships. You cannot heal relational wounds in isolation. You may find insight alone. You may practice techniques alone. But deep emotional healing requires being seen, heard, and felt by another human being who is safe, present, and non-judgmental. For many trauma survivors, this is the most difficult part of the healing journey. Trusting another person, letting someone in, risking connection. But it is also the most transformative. When a survivor experiences a safe relationship, whether in therapy, friendship, community, or love, their nervous system learns something profound. Not all people are dangerous. Not all closeness leads to pain. I can be connected and still be safe. In therapy, this is called the therapeutic alliance, the relationship between therapist and client. And while many models of therapy exist, the healing power of that relationship is consistent across the board. When the therapist is attuned, accepting, and reliable, the client begins to internalize safety. Their nervous system, once stuck in fight or flight, begins to rest. The body learns it doesn't have to brace for danger all the time. And it's important to say that safe connection doesn't mean perfect or flawless. It means consistent, caring, and responsive enough to allow for repair when ruptures happen, because no relationship is without mistakes, even in therapy. But the key is repair. When a rupture happens and the other person responds with honesty, care, and accountability, it sends a powerful message to the trauma survivor. You're not too much. You're not broken. We can move through this together. If you've been traumatized, you may have developed what we call relational adaptations. You might keep people at arm's length. You might people please to stay safe. You might become hypervigilant to others' moods or withdraw completely. These are not flaws. These are survival strategies. But over time, if we want to move from surviving to living, we have to replace these adaptations with something new, something that allows for connection without fear. This is why group therapy, peer support, and somatic communities can be so powerful. They offer repeated, lived experiences of safety in the presence of others. They recondition the nervous system through real-time interaction. They give the body what it never got, the experience of being in relationship without having to disappear, perform, or protect. If you are healing from trauma, I want you to hear this. You are not meant to do it alone. You were hurt in relationship, and you must be healed in relationship. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. Because your body, your brain, your heart, all of them are wired to thrive through connection. And the more you experience safe, attuned connection, the more your nervous system will believe, I am safe now, I can rest, I can heal. The body keeps score, and it's always honest. You may forget what happened, you may block it, rationalize it, or silence it, but your body doesn't forget. Your body is the most honest witness to your life. It carries everything, the fear, the shutdown, the flinching, the bracing, the breath you didn't take, the tension in your shoulders when someone raises their voice, the way you dissociate when you feel cornered, the ache in your chest you can't explain. These are not random. They are memories. They are the language of the body, speaking what the mind cannot yet say. In trauma work, I often say the body keeps the score, and it does so with remarkable precision, not to punish you, not to sabotage you, but because the body is always trying to protect you, always adapting, always preparing for the worst based on what it has survived in the past. It is trying to keep you alive, even if that means never letting you fully relax again. Here's the truth most people miss. Trauma isn't just something that happened to you in the past. It's something that continues to live inside you, in the present, in the body, in the way you breathe, the way you react, the way you hold yourself. That's why healing trauma is not just about talking. It's about listening to your body, because the body holds everything the conscious mind tries to avoid. You may not remember what happened when you were 6, but your body does. You may not remember why your stomach tightens in crowds, but your body does. You may not know why you panic when someone raises their voice, but your nervous system remembers, and it responds instantly, often without your permission, long before your rational brain has time to catch up. The problem is, most people try to outthink their trauma. They try to heal from the neck up, but trauma is not stored in the thinking brain. It's stored in the survival brain and the body. That's why insight alone is not enough. That's why talking alone is not enough. That's why you can go to therapy for years, understand everything logically, and still feel like nothing has changed. Healing requires more than insight. It requires integration. It requires experiences that help your body feel what your mind knows. That's what safety provides. Not just the absence of danger, but the presence of regulation, the ability to feel without becoming overwhelmed, to remember without reliving, to move without freezing. That's where somatic therapy comes in, body-based healing that doesn't just ask what happened, but what does your body need to feel safe now? It might look like breath work, movement, grounding, or touch. It might mean learning how to notice sensations without judgment, how to stay present with discomfort instead of fleeing from it, how to feel your feet on the ground when your mind wants to run. These are not small steps. They are revolutionary acts of reclaiming your body from the grip of trauma. Because for many survivors, the body has not felt like a safe place for a very long time. It was the scene of the crime. It carries the pain, the shame, the helplessness. And so, understandably, many people disconnect from their bodies. They numb, they dissociate, they live from the neck up, trying not to feel too much. But healing asks us to come home to the body, not all at once, not forcefully, but gently, gradually, with curiosity and compassion, to feel the ground again, to breathe fully, to notice without judgment what is happening inside. This is not easy. In fact, for many, it's the hardest part. Feeling is hard when feeling has meant danger, but it is also where freedom lies, because the only way out of trauma is through the body. When we work with trauma, we must remember that we are not just working with the past. We are working with the present-day survival responses that were once adaptive. The flinch, the freeze, the rage, the shutdown. These are not signs of a broken person. They are signs of a person who adapted to overwhelming conditions. But those adaptations, once life-saving, can become prisons. They can keep you stuck even when the danger is long gone. That's why we need to give the body new experiences, not just new thoughts. Experiences of safety, of agency, of connection. Experiences where the body learns, I don't have to brace anymore. I can relax, I can feel, I can move, I can exist without fear. One of the most powerful interventions we can offer is not a technique, it's presence. To sit with someone, to breathe with them, to attune to their body, to co-regulate with them until their body begins to believe it is safe again. Because trauma is about terror in isolation, but healing is about safety in connection. And that begins in the body. Why talking isn't enough, the limits of cognitive insight. There is a well-meaning but misguided belief in modern mental health treatment that if you can just talk about it, you'll heal. That if you can put your pain into words, explain it, analyze it, understand it, then you'll finally be free of it. But trauma doesn't work like that, not fully. Talking can help. Understanding can help. Language is powerful. It gives shape to what was once unspoken. It gives you a sense of control, meaning coherence. But insight alone doesn't heal trauma. Why? Because trauma lives in parts of the brain that language doesn't reach. When we experience trauma, the brain shifts. the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning, reflection, and verbal expression, shuts down. Meanwhile, the amygdala, the fear center, becomes hyperactive. The body floods with stress hormones. The rational mind goes offline. The emotional and sensory brain takes over. In that moment, you are no longer forming a narrative. You are surviving. Your brain is encoding sensations, images, smells, body movements. Your trauma is stored in the implicit memory system, not as a story, but as fragments, triggers, bodily responses, flashes of emotion. And these implicit memories are not easily accessed through talk alone. That's why someone can say, "I know it wasn't my fault," and still feel deep shame in their body. That's why a veteran can describe a battlefield in perfect detail, but still wake up shaking from nightmares. That's why survivors of abuse can explain everything that happened and still freeze when they hear a certain voice or smell a certain cologne. Because trauma is not just a story you tell, it's a state your body remembers. So what does this mean for healing? It means we need more than cognitive therapy. We need therapies that work with the body, the senses, and the subconscious. We need methods that can access the nonverbal parts of the brain, the right hemisphere, the limbic system, the brainstem. This is why techniques like EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, yoga, neurofeedback, somatic experiencing, art therapy, and rhythmic movement are so powerful. They reach the places that words cannot. They speak the language of the body, the language of sensation, rhythm, and movement, the language trauma speaks. I've seen people spend years in talk therapy, gaining insight after insight, and still remain stuck, still triggered, still numb, still unable to relax or connect. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because their therapy is only speaking to the thinking brain, not the survival brain, not the body. This is not a criticism of talk therapy. It's a call for expansion, because when it comes to trauma, the goal isn't just to understand what happened, it's to experience yourself differently in the present. It's one thing to say, "I know I'm safe." It's another to feel it in your chest, your breath, your muscles. It's one thing to say, "I'm allowed to set boundaries." It's another to feel empowered in your body when you say no. It's one thing to say, "I deserve love." It's another to stay present and regulated when someone offers it. This is what real healing looks like. Not just new thoughts, but new experiences. Not just information, but integration. This is why safety matters so much. Not just physical safety, but emotional, relational, nervous system safety. Because only in that state can the brain begin to rewire, can the body begin to release, can the trauma begin to be processed instead of reenacted. Safety is not the end goal. It is the beginning, the foundation, the soil in which healing grows. Without it, therapy can become another performance, another mask, another place where you say all the right things while your body still lives in a war zone. But with it, with real embodied safety, something miraculous happens. The body begins to feel. The brain begins to integrate. You begin to shift, not because you're forcing yourself, but because something deep inside is finally letting go. That's when you realize you're not broken. You were protecting yourself, and now finally you're allowed to stop. Safety first, because you deserve to feel alive. Let me leave you with this. You cannot heal in survival mode because healing requires slowness, gentleness, and choice. Your body is not your enemy. Your symptoms are not signs of weakness. They are the imprints of what you had to do to survive. And now, survival is no longer the only option. Now you get to heal slowly, tenderly, without pressure, without performance, not to prove something, not to get over it, but because you deserve peace, you deserve wholeness, you deserve to feel alive. Safety isn't a luxury, it's the soil from which all healing grows. So if you're struggling, don't ask, "What's wrong with me?" Ask instead, "What safety has been missing? What compassion has never been given to me? What part of me is still waiting for permission to come out of hiding. That is where the healing begins. And if no one ever told you before, let me say it now, you are not broken. You are not weak. You are not too much. You are a survivor carrying a story your body had no words for. And now, maybe for the first time, you're allowed to rest. You're allowed to feel safe. You're allowed to come home to yourself because you can't heal in survival mode, but you can heal when you finally feel safe. And that is where everything changes.